Hello. I'm sure you get sent a lot of stories detailing all sorts of horrible things happening to people. But one common theme that I've heard amongst some of your stories, not all of them, but just a handful, is this whole concept of Indian burial grounds. I've seen some comments on your channel that people dismiss the whole idea as being this stupid creepypasta cliche. But I'm here to tell you right now that they are adamantly very real. I cannot express this enough. Let me explain. Where I live on a bunch of land. And in fact, because of the land I live on, there's an old, what used to be Indian burial ground far out. And because I live on kind of like a slope that almost leads into a small valley, I have a perfect view of seeing where this monument used to be. Now, I know it's kind of hard to understand, but there's really not that much there now. The only thing that really remains is these large stone pillars that are very crude in design, and probably about 18 feet if I'm guessing. I'm not joking, and what I see upon them is exactly what I'm writing to you about. Sometimes, in the evening time, I'll see these large gargoyle-like figures perched on top. They are perfectly still like statues, but the issue being is that they are not always there. Sometimes they are there, and sometimes they are not. I've gone over to that area, hiking and exploring, and it's very uncomfortable to say the least. The entire place, not just the old burial ground, but even the land around it, has a very weird energy to it. It's a feeling. It's a very powerful feeling. It's kind of like you're walking into a field with a bunch of magnets. There's a lot of static and electricity. It's very hard for me to describe accurately. It's a place you would just have to go by yourself so you can get an idea of what it was. It's a place you would just have to go to by yourself just so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. When I bought this land many years back, I was told that these old stone pillars are the remnants of what used to be a burial ground, and that it probably was a good idea if I stayed away from it. At the time, I just assumed it was a bunch of hogwash. But then again, I can't refute the feelings that I get when I walk around it. When I'm on my back porch, I have a perfect view because, as I said, the land slopes down into almost a tiny valley, and it sits right down there. If I had to say, I'd say it's probably between 300 to 500 yards away from my back porch. There are trees in between, but it's enough that I can see the stone pillars and the tops of them. Again, I want to get back to the real reason that I'm writing to you, but I have to set up the backstory to know that this place is eerie, and I have yet to walk around this place at nighttime. The one time that I nearly did, it was evening time, and it was years ago when I was exploring the area. I kept having this awful feeling, like I was being watched, like somebody was directly behind me, like they were going to reach out for me and grab me, but nothing ever happened. I like to say that I have eyes like an owl, where I feel like I can turn my head a total 180 degrees and keep a good eye around me at all times. But even then, with that extra sixth sense that I like to say I have, I still felt like I was in danger. So now, I try and stay far away from that area. The weird thing here is that I'm seeing these large gargoyle figures perched on top these stone pillars. There are 4 stone pillars in total, and it's usually I only ever see these 4 gargoyle figures perched on each one, or I don't at all. It's never that I only see 1 or 2, or even 3. It's either all 4 or not, and they come and go. I'm not trying to give you or feed you a fiction story. When I go out there on my porch sometimes, and they're there, it's like I'm looking at statues. They're perfectly still, and I don't think they're living beings, but I don't know why they disappear and reappear. But here's where it gets creepier. Sometimes at night, I'll hear this screaming, this loud screeching screaming. It's almost like if you were to listen to a real-life dragon, or an eagle amplified by 10, and then put through some sort of distorted filter. And sometimes at night, I'll see dark shapes moving around. It's really creepy out here. Trust me when I say that I'd be the first person to laugh at you and tell you witchcraft, LOL, big deal. But I don't know. Now that I've been living in it, my mind is kind of changed. I know natives in general probably did some crazy freaky stuff to their burial grounds. I don't know for the sake of protection or what. Or maybe it's just that their magic died with them, and beings of different realms have come to protect it. I don't know. This is all just loose speculation. But whatever it is, I cannot deny the things and the horrors that are living around that burial ground. I understand it sounds cheesy, but again, I'm here to adamantly tell you that these things are very real. In fact, I invite anybody to go exploring in any burial ground and for them to tell me that they're not sensing anything weird or seeing dark shapes or things that shouldn't be there out of the corner of their eyes. I almost sometimes feel like I'm in danger, but luckily, from where I live, and even where my back porch is, even though I have a perfect view of the entire establishment, I guess you could call it, I still sometimes feel like I might be vulnerable. Although I don't really feel anything come up to my house, so it's nothing like that. So I'm either having a very schizophrenic, lucid hallucination of these figures that look just like gargoyles, or potentially, there might be something much more evil at work here. This isn't my story, but actually one of my older cousins. He has a really crazy wild survival story of when he was serving and training in the military back in 1982. At the time, he and a few other individuals had been hand-selected for a survival training where they were to be put out in different areas of the Ozark Mountains and had to survive for 7 days with just minimal, basic supplies. Well, that's not the scary part. What is that he describes to me that he was attacked by what he says a large, half-man, half-bat creature that nearly picked him up off the ground and almost flew away with him. But he was able to break free, and what he said cut this thing's foot off with a large Bowie knife that he had. He obviously survived, and only fell about 20 feet, is what he said. He never told anybody of this encounter, at least anybody in the military, because nobody would believe him. And then years later, as he began living life, he started to hear things more like Bigfoot encounters and stuff like that happening out in the Ozarks, and how it just seems to be a general hot spot for paranormal and weird things to happen. You see, at the time, he knew nothing of Bigfoot, or anything out of that realm of normal reality, so this was quite spooky to hear. And besides, my cousin is very straight to the point, and doesn't have time for BS. It is completely out of character for him to make up a story like this. And when he tells me this story, he's as serious as a heart attack. You can see the expression in his eyes as he's describing what exactly this thing looked like. He just tells me that it was a half-man, half-bat. There's no other way to describe it. And he said this thing was larger than him. He said it came out from the trees, or so he thought. And because he was in an undisclosed location in the mountains, and he was by himself, there were no other witnesses around to disprove or prove what he had to say. He said, though, during those 7 days, besides that whole account, he hardly if ever saw any other animals, and actually at the time went pretty hungry because he had a hard time foraging for food and even finding much meat to eat on. So that was really his excitement for the entire trip. Since him telling me this, I've tried to do some of my own research, but I couldn't really find much, other than your traditional alien stuff and Bigfoot stuff along the entire Ozark area. Now, I don't know if I really necessarily disbelieve him, because, like I told you, he's a very serious individual and doesn't have time to make up stories, and he doesn't really have anything to gain from it either. He's not looking for notoriety or fame of any kind. In fact, he even asked that I keep his identity anonymous, just so nothing can be traced back to him, and fear that he gets ridiculed, or worse, especially in today's cancel culture. He has a reputation and a lot riding on it, so he couldn't bear to have his story known publicly. unless it was shrouded in anonymity. That's the only condition he gave me to be able to share this story with you. Had this happened to another individual who wasn't near as tough or hardcore as my cousin, they might not have lived or survived to tell the tale. Anyway, that's my cousin's story. I hope you enjoy it. Do with it what you will.